217,000 square foot facility off Highway 169 in Shelton. This facility will house 330 permanent jobs and up to 1,000 seasonal jobs over the holidays. In order to attract this kind of business, the city, state, and county officials had to work together to provide infrastructure, workforce, and incentives, or they could risk losing the project to Wisconsin. Today we have 3 people who are involved in the government side of the deal to give you some insights as to how a large business like this was attracted to Minnesota, and specifically to Shakopee. We have Samantha DiMaggio, Shakopee's Economic Development Coordinator, Gary Shelton, Sky County Administrator, and Jim Gromberg, Business Development Coordinator at D. Come on up, guys.
Starting with the sheriff's office and working my way from an entry-level job in jail to the county administrator.
I am Samantha DiMaggio. I am originally from Greater Minnesota. My family's from Polk County, a small town called Erskine. So anything I can ever do for Greater Minnesota, you just give me a call. I got your back. And I started off at the Workforce Center. I worked in the Roseau, East Grand Forks, Crookston, and Beaver Falls Workforce Centers. I was then promoted at D to a loan officer in St. Paul. I worked as a loan officer for 5 years, covered regions 7W and 9, and I was commuting daily from Shakopee to St. Paul. So when this position came up in Shakopee in April, I decided to go for it. So it's been quite an adventure since I started. I've had a busy 7 months, but it's been great. So I'm glad to be here today.
I'm Jim Gromberg. I'm the Metro Regional Business Development Rep for the Department of Employment and Economic Development. I get the pleasure of working with people like Sam and Gary on bringing projects to their communities. A little background on me: I was an economic development director, city administrator, SBA banker, so I really understand the finance side of it, and also what businesses look for and how we view businesses and how we can make businesses successful.
Thanks. Now, I want the format of this to be really casual, so as I ask the questions, if you guys just want to jump in and kind of build off what the other's saying, I think that would give everyone kind of the best idea of how this whole project came together. So I'm going to start with you, Sam. Can you start by telling us how the discussion with Shutterfly started and kind of how this whole thing got off the ground? If you others want to jump in, well, that'd be great.
Definitely. It was kind of interesting. I got a call from a group called Jones Lang LaSalle, and they invited me downtown for a meeting. And I said, great, can you tell me what it's about? No, but we look forward to seeing you. So I thought, okay, we'll see how this goes. So I kind of wondered if it was Shutterfly. I heard from some of my brokers that they had been out shopping around. I also heard from my mayor that brokers like to talk about their deals. So it was, I tried to get it out of D and Greater MSP, and everyone just said, we just really don't know if it's Shutterfly or not. So we all went down to Jones Lang LaSalle, and it was in fact Shutterfly. What I found interesting is how much information they knew about us already. Obviously they had done their homework. They had a ton of statistics about town. They had information on the property. They had a laundry list of probably 10 or 15 requests from me. I think at one point they said, Sam, it's okay. I think I had this deer in the headlight look like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get you these 15 things you just asked for? And I just started with the city a few weeks ago, so it was kind of interesting, but I definitely think that they had done their research. I'd also heard through the grapevine later on that one of the employees for Jones Lang LaSalle, her name is Amy, and she's out of Atlanta, Georgia, had just helped Shutterfly get their plant in Fort Mill, South Carolina. So when they started looking for someplace in the north, and where they knew they had a really good market, the Jones Lang LaSalle employees started talking amongst each other and said, you know what, we have a great relationship with a broker in Minnesota, and that was Casey Hankinson. So I think some of that kind of brought it together too. I think that we definitely played a role, but I think those relationships were huge because they knew people who knew people. They obviously enjoyed working together, and they wanted to do this deal with us. So I definitely think that helped.
Great. So in what order did each of you get involved in the organization? Sam, sounds like you were kind of the first line. What about the other two? When did you guys start to get involved?
Really, and the beauty of a lot of these projects, and kind of what Dan was talking about, you start, is that they come through a variety of different relationships. This one, Sam and Greater MSP and Indeed had our meeting downtown St. Paul, or Minneapolis, excuse me, the other policy, we really sit down then and talk about the project and what the project is. The site selection, in this case Jones JLL, is always going to press you as people for more incentives. Incentives to most companies aren't as big a deal as workforce, available workforce, a feeling that the community actually wants them there. And that's one of the things that Shakopee and Scott County did a very, very good job on. Is they made Shutterfly and JLL feel welcome in the community. And that's really the most important thing that you can ever do, because it is about relationships. Even if you lose this deal, it doesn't mean that a deal 5 years, 5 months, 10 minutes down the road doesn't come your way. So it's really about developing those types of relationships. And on the front end, being real honest and open. If your community isn't interested in providing assistance, tell them that. Be upfront. Because if you try to pull them along until you think you get them to a point where they cannot change their decision, it will clearly change the decision going in different directions. So it's really on the front end side of it. Be honest, open, upfront. If they're asking for something that you don't think you can do, tell them that. Be real upfront about it. Say, hey, we want to work with you, but we can't do this. You may be able to do something else, which is really where Shakopee and Scott County came in. On this project, on Emerson, which is another big project that they recently landed, really sitting down and saying, okay, how do we help you? Not necessarily what are you asking for, but how can we help you get to the end of the day?
The county comes in to this, any specific project, really at the tail end on a specific project. But the county really, from our perspective, plays a bigger role on the front end, even before that project comes forward, in that we really recognize that it's the cities that have to lead specific projects. Businesses want relationships with their local city government. The county, at least from our perspective, we view our role as a support for the cities, and we view it as providing resources to the city, and to create that climate that makes the Shutterfly type project available. So a big part of what we did, really, you have to back up to long before Shutterfly even decided that they would take a look and come here. One, we formed a partnership. So I would tell you if you're part of the end partnership or if you're counties, and I disagree a little bit on just going after CDA. Let's talk about the county proper. Because we have a CDA that is part of greater MSP, but the county itself does as well. And we actually pay the fee for all 7 cities in our county to be part of greater MSP. It's looking at, okay, what sectors might you be able to attract and what type of infrastructure can you build within your community? So a big part of what the county did that was very successful in bringing both Emerson and Shutterfly was that broadband. Because Scott County, while it's part of the metropolitan area, we're the tail of the metropolitan area because we're the second smallest in terms of population. We are as much rural as we are urban. We have the northeast corner of the county is rather urbanized, but the vast majority of the county is still fairly rural. And the county itself invested about $5, maybe $6 million over several years in building a fiber backbone. And so we built a huge fiber backbone that literally stretches from Mankato. So we actually built Scott County fiber to the city of Mankato, and a variety of reasons why, all the way to downtown Minneapolis, including building fiber. So Scott County has fiber throughout our own county, but also Carver County, Dakota County, Denton County, and Ramsey County. It's really that entire metro area, so that we could use the fiber not only for our institutional purposes, but as an incentive for businesses, and to provide very cheap, very affordable broadband. So where we come into Shutterfly is at the tail end, because they're going to deal with the city first, and that's appropriate. But then as they're looking for, as was said, what can you bring to the table? When we met with Shutterfly, what we laid out, here's what the county can bring to the table. Obviously, an incentive that we looked at that said we'd be more than willing to bring to the table was tax abatement. A little bit unusual for a county to say, yes, we'll do tax abatement. but that was not a problem for our county. But in terms of a financial incentive, the bigger incentive for us was bringing the broadband. We were able to put together a broadband fiber package using our infrastructure. We're not a provider, so we're not providing them with broadband service, but we use our infrastructure in order to leverage broadband services for them at a drastically reduced cost from two private providers, and that savings to them is about $160,000 a year. So over a 10-year period of time, it's about a $1.6 million savings to them. Now, the county had to invest some to do that, so we actually said, we'll make a capital contribution. We'll spend $100,000 to build laterals to our backbone to actually connect you. We'll put in the electronics, or we'll light it up. And then they draw their services from that private vendor. So what we really look at, the county's role is to come in towards the end and really to provide resources. So Samantha talked about how she was new to the city. This came on relatively quickly. The county also helps to fund what we call a first stop shop. So it is a clearinghouse for information. It's actually somebody that Samantha can go to and say, help me find this information, help me put this together. And any of our cities could. As I said, we paid for the city to be a member of Greater MSP, and we pay for all of our cities to be that member. So really what we look at is our role, the county's role, is to help all of the, not only 11 townships, but the 7 cities. And most of the dollars we spend go to the city. So, unlike apparently Greater Minnesota, our county recognizes that all of our city residents pay county taxes as well. And so we literally will invest those dollars back into things that will help each individual city in terms of that. And so it was really with incentives and resources, specific grants. So we actually, through our CDA, have provided grants to each city to do economic planning. So actual cash grants that are fairly simple to apply for. You really just have to show that you're almost going to do anything that might promote economic development. You qualify for that grant. We pay for their membership in a variety of different things. We share that fiber infrastructure with them at absolutely no cost. And then, assuming that they have provided an incentive, we will almost always match. In fact, I can't think of any instance where we haven't matched that incentive. So if they give a tax abatement incentive, they can almost plan that the county will do the same. So that we bring really financial resources, but while at the same time recognize that the city needs to lead that process, because that's really who the business wants to talk to. They're not as interested in talking to us as they are to whatever community they're actually going to reside in.
Okay. One thing I want to mention is Julie just passed out cards to all of you. If you have some questions you'd like to ask the panel, go ahead and write them down. Just hold them up, and one of the staff members will bring them up to me. My next question for you guys is, when this whole thing was going on, Governor Dayton was going on a lot of secret missions. I'm just wondering when the governor got involved, what he was able to do, kind of what the governor's role in all of this was.
I got a call from Deed saying, hey, the governor wants to go on this secret mission, and they want to know if your mayor wants to go along. And I was like, that sounds great. And we were really excited about it. And I think our city was a little, I don't know if there was a mixed review. I think everyone was kind of wondering if we needed this extra push at this point or not. I was feeling pretty good about the deal, but I thought if this is kind of icing on the cake, let's go for it and see what happens. And so the mayor went out there with them, and I think it was a great experience. And my mayor will tell you the story that at the end of the meeting, they met with the CEO of the company, and he said, where's your next stop, Governor? And the governor said, I'm going home. And they couldn't believe that he had flown all the way out there just to meet with them. But that's how important this deal was for Minnesota. This is a brand new company coming into Minnesota. The number of jobs they're going to bring, it was a very exciting time. And I'm really honored that he did that for us. And I think that the company was even more honored that he went out there. I don't know if there was a better story. I know we got quite a bit of press for Shutterfly. And so I don't know if he'd seen it somewhere along the way, or if his staff or if he had recommended it. I'm not sure beyond that, but maybe Jim can fill in more.
Staff would never suggest tell the governor what to do. He is the leader.
Good answer.
In Minnesota right now, we have a great advantage. governor is very engaged in economic development. In the past, years and years ago, and Dan and I are almost old enough to remember this, not quite old enough to remember this, the governor was the commissioner of the Department of Employment and Trade at that point, Economic Development and Trade at that point, many years ago. So he really enjoys doing economic development. He really enjoys making those phone calls or making those trips to visit companies, encouraging them to locate in Minnesota. On a regular basis, every couple of weeks, we'll get a request from the governor's office that says, what projects do you have going on? Would it be beneficial for the governor to give them a call or visit them, depending upon where they're located at? And so we do that on a regular basis. He makes the calls, he visits with the companies, he does a very good job. And I think some of these recent projects that you've seen and some that will be announced in the near future are really exemplify that involvement that he really wants to have. And I think the legislature has decided that economic development is a good thing. They've put together some good programs, the job creation fund that's coming out in the near future as of January 1st, which will be a great advantage to not just the Twin Cities metro area, but the outstate area also, which is...
They're not upstate, they're greater.
Yes, I know. And that'll be great for the state as a whole, which is what really we need to do. It's one of these things where there are great reasons to be in the metro area, there's great reasons not to be in the metro area, and each company needs to make those decisions. But what we need to do as city and economic development professionals is make sure that it's painless for them to locate wherever they choose to locate. And then work with them at the end of the day.
I had to laugh. There was a backstory with the mayor on the airplane. So I said, did you take the governor's private jet? He's like, Sam, he doesn't have a private jet. And I was like, oh, because that was my first thought. I'm like, did you go first class? No, we went coach. And I was like, did anyone notice when you got on the plane? And the mayor said, no, we all kind of got on and sat down. And he goes, I don't think anyone even realized it was the governor. Everyone was just kind of sitting there looking around. So as they were coming into California, Brad sent me a text and said, the police are here and the fire are here, everybody's here. And I was like, oh, are they there to meet you? He's like, no, they didn't think our landing gear was going to come down. So here's all these emergency response people. And here's me thinking, oh, they were super excited the governor was coming in. It's like, no, Sam. And I was like, wow, maybe next time. That was fun.
So, Gary, you touched on the incentives a little bit that the county was able to do. I'm kind of wondering what Deed and the city offered to Shutterfly, if you're able to talk about it, or at least in general talk about kind of the incentives that came from each of you.
Do you want to go first?
Oh, you can go first. You get so much more.
I know.
We're so much more.
I know.
Your first time.
I know. When I brought this deal back to the city after I got to settle down for a few minutes, I was very excited about it, but they had promised 329 full-time permanent jobs and up to 1,000 seasonal, and I just didn't know if I wanted this deal. I know that sounds crazy, but I thought 1,000 seasonal? I mean, that just seems like, I thought, where am I going to find 1,000 seasonal people? And then as we all kind of started talking, they said, well, we have Canterbury that really peaks in the summer. They lay people off during that time, during that winter, fall time. Maybe this would be a great opportunity to pick someone up. So as I kind of started talking to the community, it kind of got better and better. And my first shot to them was a 50% abatement. I knew my partners at the county would also mirror me, so I thought 50% abatement, if I could get Shutterfly for that, that would be great. And they called me back and said, no, we don't want 50% abatement. They actually had a sheet for me of every deal that we had done, and they had analyzed every single deal, how much we had given everybody else, and they said, we think we're as good as Rosemont Emerson, take your paper back, go to sharpen your pencil, basically. And so I thought, shoot, it kind of surprised me all the stuff that they knew. But when you do these deals, this is all public information. I mean, they just had to do a couple of Google searches, and I think they would very easily find what we had offered everybody else. So we talked about it again, and someone, I think it was Jim, said to me, Sam, forget about the seasonal jobs. If I was coming to town and I told you I was going to create 329 permanent jobs, would you be excited? And I would have been. I would have been super excited. And that's what I did, is I started to talk to everyone. I actually had a meeting with the county commissioners, and one of them said, I don't know if I like this deal. And I had said, and for Gary, I was afraid I upset Gary, but I said, if you don't want this deal, then tell me right now, because they don't want to come here. They're only going to come here if you want them. So you need to tell me right here, right now, today, are we going to go for this, or are we going to go home? And they were like, nope, we're going to go for it. Gary said, You know, it's tough in that political realm. It's always tough to make those decisions. But I think as a city, we saw those 329 jobs. And one other thing that I thought was really great about them was the fact that they told me they have a shift that starts Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. You work 3 12-hour shifts. They pay you as if you work a 40-hour week. You get full benefits. And they said they have a lot of families that want that. And I like that it gives you alternative options. I like that there's, maybe if you're a working mom and you want to work just the weekend shift so you can have that joint parenting with your partner. I thought that was a great option. So we did end up going for 100% abatement. I think it equaled out to be on our side, was it 750,000, I think? I think 750,000 over 9 years. But I thought it was interesting, one of the things that they had asked me is we had done some infrastructure in advance on the parcels. And originally there was 4 parcels. During the, kind of in the middle, maybe 1/3 section, we had already put in a water main and a sewer main. Kind of thinking in advance, like this will be great, just a pad-ready site when someone comes in. And they're like, Sam, our building's gonna be so big, we don't want that there, will you move it? So we actually worked with the developer in this case, it was Casey Hankinson with Ryan. And Casey helped them to redo the site plan where it would fit with the water main there. But there was some struggles in between, so in a nice way, I guess we luckily got off with just 100% abatement from our share. But we went to Uncle Jimmy and Deed. I know. 9-year abatement. Yep, so 9-year abatement. But I always tell people, I think it's interesting when you look at the bigger picture and the cost for them to build that building, and the cost for them to hook up to our water then, even though the main route was there, the cost of hooking up to the water and to the sewer and to the public utility, I think the public utility, I can't even remember how much it cost for them to get the power that they needed. So in a sense, I kind of felt like some of it was almost a wash for what we got, for what they got. In the end, it was interesting. I didn't realize how many other things it cost them to do business in our community. I think that people don't really look at that big picture and think it's going to cost them some money to build this building. And they are actually leasing the building, so that was also another thing that the city was nervous about, thinking, well, should we do this deal with them? They're not going to own the building. But like someone said, if they're here, they're making a commitment to town, they're not going to pick up and pull all their workers and all the relationships they've created. That's a huge cost, just training the workers. And so I think if you look at the things we're going to get back from it, one thing that is also important to note is with our recent abatements, we have not included the school districts. So we have asked the county to partner with us, but we have kept the school district at their full share. My community's also been confused about fiscal disparities. We pay fiscal, I don't know if that's statewide, do you all pay that, or just us? We pay fiscal disparities. Okay, so we pay it, and we tell them when it goes to Prior Lake, I don't really know where it goes, but we pay the fiscal disparities. And so when you look at their taxes every single year, I think that their taxes that they're going to pay into Shakopee are about between $651,000 and $751,000 a year. So if I give them $100,000 a year and the county gives them $100,000 a year, they're still paying $500,000 a year in taxes. That's going to go to the state, it's going to go to fiscal disparities, it's going to go to the school districts, it's going to go for any special taxes that we have in. So I think when people from town think, oh, they're not even paying any taxes, I'm thinking, you think they're not paying any taxes? They're paying a huge amount of taxes. And they're also then helping to share the load for everybody else. I think that's the hard thing for people to give and take and figure out. So it's been a challenge, but I think it's just educating your public. If you're gonna start to do this, that's something you're really gonna wanna work with in advance, is making sure everybody understands how abatement works and what portions are actually being given away. I'm going to sold the farm. I think I gave the farm away. Yeah. I know.
Sam and I know each other really well, so we don't usually take too many things seriously. The state's involvement, we get $1 million forgivable loan through MIF, which is the Minnesota Investment Fund. The loan can become forgivable if they create all the jobs they say they're going to do and capital expenditures that they talked about, which is roughly $32 million, I think was the estimate, and then create 350 jobs. Then at the end of 2 years, and that 2 years actually ends after the building's up, built, operating 2 years from that point. If they've created the jobs, then the loan can become forgivable. That money actually goes, similar to the county, we let the city take the lead because for Shutterfly in this case, or any business, it's really, we want that relationship, not between the state and the company, but really between the community and the company. So we give the money to the city then actually gives the money to Shutterfly or the company that's going to together. And the city actually makes, they're part of that decision whether or not it becomes a forgivable loan. They want to have them pay it over this back. So that's really what we were involved with, was about $1 million.
One of the fun things about a project like this as well, and it's a big splash in Shakopee, ripples are felt all over the state, and I got a note from Mayor Albrecht of Bemidji, I don't know if she's still in here, pointing out that right after the Shutterfly announcement happened, a company called Synergy Solutions in Bemidji got a contract with Shutterfly to do some telemarketing. So this does affect the entire state when things like this happen. However, I would also like to point out to Mayor Albrecht that Casey Hankinson was a Golden Gopher hockey player, not a Beaver hockey player. So when projects like this have this big expansion, it makes you wonder, were there tools you didn't have, that looking back on the way the project came together, there were certain points where you wished you would have had something that doesn't exist, and what are those things?
One thing that I've heard a lot recently is everybody wants better energy rates. So if you can give someone better energy rates, I would be telling the world about it, because that is something that all my businesses have asked for recently. They're very high energy users. I cannot control the energy rates. There's really, unless I try to figure out something with incentive to help offset them, that might be something we'd have to do in the future. But any of the data centers, Shutterfly is thinking about having a small data center inside. They're all huge energy users, and that's something that Jim has tried to have to counsel me on a little bit, that's something I can't control, and that's something that they want, better energy rates. They're very large users.
I can't take it even a thing from the county perspective. And like I said, from the greater Minnesota perspective, I would tell you that the one thing that every big deal, we've had a number of big deals in the county, not just in Shakopee, we've had some of the other communities as well. Broadband has been a big, so we have broadband issues. I'm talking big broadband. Shutterfly needed 2 10-gigabit pipes for their operation. They needed redundant services at 10 gigabits. You need to be able to provide something that large at a really reasonable cost. And so if you don't have that ability, I would tell you, work with whoever you can, whether it's your county, whether it's your EPA businesses or whoever, but work to try to make that available. I've not seen any of them yet, but broadband was not a significant issue for them.
That's at the same time encouraging to us to hear that that's the way we're going to be working on it, but it's frustrating in that Greater Minnesota only has 50% of the broadband capability that the trustees has at 8 megabits. So that's how slow, that's where we're coming from right now.
And I would respond to that by saying, and Scott County was probably exactly the same or worse off. We had very, very limited bandwidth and actually very high prices. And no leadership from the state or the region on trying to do anything with broadband. And it's actually why the county in part undertook it. And it can be done. There are ways to do it. You know, the county invested a lot of money, but I will tell you that we started saving money on day one. So we may have spent a lot of dollars up front, but the truth is we reduced our expenses, not only ours, but our school districts and our cities and our townships. I was telling Dan earlier that the largest saver is actually the state of Minnesota, who shares our fiber infrastructure. So I'm just saying there are ways to pay for it without having to. We didn't increase taxes one day to pay for that broadband through a variety of different partnerships. You know, from my perspective, if you're waiting on the state or somebody else to step up and figure out how to provide it within your region, you're going to be waiting for a long time. So I would encourage you to find those partnerships and make it work.
Jim, you started off by saying incentives weren't necessarily the key to this deal, that workforce was far more important to Shutterfly. I'm wondering if there's any concern about training and educating the workforce for these jobs. Was that workforce already there? Kind of walk us through the workforce portion.
You know, in all honesty, I mean, I'll back just a little bit. and then go forward. If you look at the most recent surveys that have been done, incentives, cash incentives provided by communities and local government, all those fun things, fall at about 12 to 13 in the list of what's important for companies when they're going to relocate, where they're going to build a facility, what they're going to do. What's much higher than that, and up in the 1, 2, 3, and 4, is workforce availability, trained workforce, those type of issues. As we see the economy continue to grow, what we're seeing is the economy is growing faster than the population. Sadly, we're dying off faster than we're putting more people into the group. And so what we will continue to see is a workforce shortage. And so companies are taking that into greater consideration when they sit down and say, where do I want to locate? It's no longer a short-term issue, it's a much more long-term issue. The state has a couple of different programs that are available to communities. Shutterfly did not take advantage of one job skills training, which is a $400,000 grant that goes to a local, usually it's a MINSCU, but an institution of higher learning, sets up training for the company to create the type of employees that they need. So there are those type of programs available. But for a community, if I was in outstate, Browerville, Minnesota, where my wife is from, and if I was going to do economic development, what I would do is look at how do we have workforce available for, if I want to locate a company in that community, how am I going to have employees work there? Where are the employees going to come from? If you look at Jackson, Minnesota, they're busing in employees for over 2 hours away because they cannot get enough employees. And basically enough people want to work there. But what the real problem is there is a lack of housing that is affordable. So when you're looking at your community and trying to figure out what you need to do economic development, sometimes it's not the easy things. Sometimes it's not, well, we just give them a bucket full of money. It's much more thinking about how do we create an economy. And that speaks back to the broadband. I suspect what you will see with broadband and broadband expansion throughout the United States is eventually a program very similar to the rural electrification program, which allowed for broadband expansion, rural electrification. Most of you understand how the co-ops work and were created. Big companies didn't want to extend electricity to the lone farmer 4 miles down the road, but you could create your own cooperative, get federal funding, and now you can provide those services. And I would suspect you're going to start to see the same things about that.
I think what Jim touches on about housing is really important because at one point someone had pointed out, I think we only had 13 lots for sale in Shakopee. So we have now hundreds of jobs coming to town and 13 lots for sale. So this is not just something that's going to affect Shakopee, this is going to affect our region. And so we're looking to all of our neighbors, and especially our neighbors in Scott County, to help make sure that everybody has lots ready and everybody has things going on. And we're in the process of putting together kind of a marketing brochure that we can give out to the new employees that will say, these are every city in Scott County, these are their builders, these are who you get your electric from, these are their schools. This is everything you need to live in our county, and welcome here, we're glad you're here working here now, to try to make that transition a little bit easier. I think everyone thinks, so, now you have the jobs, they'll just come, but I think there's more to that. They have to have jobs for their spouses, they're curious about your schools, they want to know where your houses are at, they want to know all that different information, so I think having that in advance is important.
And I would tend to agree, and one of the things that we've done collectively within the county is create what we call a unified plan. So we put together a unified plan that is setting the county on economic development that deals with all of those issues. Workforce development is a significant issue. We don't have all the workforce in place for the businesses, quite honestly, that are coming. We have probably the people, we don't have the right skill sets, and so one of the things that we've been working on collectively is how do we do some retraining and skill building within the community. And so we've been working with some of the community colleges. We don't have colleges in Scott County, but we have community colleges that are relatively close. So we've been doing a lot of work with them. And with the businesses to determine, okay, what skills do we need to focus on? So I would tell you that long term, and I go back to saying, Shutterfly is a today's success, but it's because of some housing and the right housing stock, both affordable housing and more upscale housing, broadband, and how are you going to develop your workforce are all things you need to be focusing on now, because they will become more and more important.
Jim, you mentioned that Shutterfly passed on the job skills partnership. Did they mention why?
At this point, I don't think it, I mean, the beauty about the job skills program is that a company at any time can take advantage of that. So you, theoretically, you could have a company that's, we have one in Ramsey that's looking to, they need to hire 20 welders. It's just a very specific type of welding, so they're working with, tech college. The company's been around for 40 years, but they can take advantage of that at any time to, train those workers as they see what they're needing. And I suspect that's what we'll see with Shutterfly. So, 3 or 4 years down the line, we go, we really need people that can do A, B, and C. Now's the time to set up that specialized training. One of the institutions of higher learning to go forward.
And then I was we had a couple of different businesses that passed on that particular, and I specifically asked them, why were you not interested in that? In part, both of them said that they had experience with it before, and the reporting and the record keeping were things that for them were difficult, and so they didn't want to get into that. Actually, they thought it was too complex. The truth is, though, the best way to get past that and make it a great incentive, because it really is a great incentive, is to work with your colleges and your VOTECs so that they help the business with that record keeping and that. And so in both instances, when we dug into why was it not a good experience for those two businesses that used it previously, it really was they didn't have the support from either the tech school or the college that was doing the training for them. But for every one that we found that there was an issue, we found half a dozen others where it really wasn't, and in large part because the providers, the educational providers, took on a lot of that responsibility. So I don't think that had anything to do necessarily with Shutterfly, but I know that's what we heard on 2 different projects as to why they really want to implement this and taking them.
Go ahead.
I missed it in the presentation, but what were the wages and was that part of your?
So when I got to the city of Shakopee, I quickly learned that they, in their business subsidy policy, have a requirement that anyone that we give assistance to has to pay a minimum of $14.50 an hour cash. And that was somewhat shocking to me because coming from Deed had the requirement of $13 an hour. So I was a little surprised when I got to Shakopee and saw that $14.50. But Shakopee's goal is to really create livable wage jobs. They want jobs that can stay in our county, be in our county. So I think that for some businesses that are looking to come here, that's tough. They don't want to pay that much. But I think in a sense, it's also keeping out a lot of maybe smaller warehouse type companies. Those are great. I think that there's people in our community that serve a need by that. But we want head of household, we want livable wage jobs. We want them to actually be able to have money and spend it in our county. So I think that, for some companies, I think that's definitely been a hindrance, but in the city of Shakopee, you have to pay $14.50 cash. So their lowest job, I think, will be a customer service call type representative job, and I believe that is a $14.50 an hour cash job.
And their average wage, and the county focuses a lot on not only the jobs, but the type of job, what is the lower wage, but also what the average wage is. Their average wage on their 329 jobs was $18.78 an hour. So it's quite a mix. I think you're right, the lower ones are about $14.50, but overall their average was that low wage.
I'm noticing from this vantage point that there seems to be a lot of collegiality and agreement between state, county, and city. How much did that play in? How important were the relationships heading into this process that the 3 of you had? And did Shutterfly feed off of that and realize this was a place they wanted to be because of that?
I would think when they invited us all to their secret party, they were maybe surprised by how many of us were coming, because when we got to the room, I brought Stacy from the First Stop Shop. She was kind of there, and we both talked. We kind of knew in advance that the county was going to have our back, and it was great that we saw Deed there. Greater MST was there. There was quite a few people there, so I think when we all got there, we all knew each other. It was a good feeling to see all of our partners there and know this is going to be okay. We're all here together. We're in this together. we all have that same goal, so I think that was good.
I wanted to comment just a little bit. As you said earlier, a big key is making sure that they realize that you really are interested in them. I had two, both Shutterfly and DataCard, comment to me specifically that they were surprised at how collegial the relationship between the county and the city. In fact, for one, we even held a joint meeting because to meet their timeline, the county board decided that they would be at the city hall with the city on an evening meeting in order to approve what that business needed to meet their timeline. But they were very surprised at and very pleased at the fact that not only was there really a collegial working relationship, but also one of them talked about the fact, when they make applications to the county, of course, it doesn't come to me, it comes to our auditor's office, and she's extremely good at what she does. But her job is to nitpick. It is to make sure that they cross every T and dot every I. And so, quite honestly, part of what I do and have my first stop shop do is have them send it to us first. Don't submit it directly to the auditor for them to pick it apart. Submit it to, and let me work with it for you. Let me take a look at it to make sure that it meets the requirements, but that you're not saying things in a way that, one of my bureaucrats that work for me that I want to be very bureaucratic is going to stick at it a bit. And both of them commented that collegiality and that we'll go that extra step. We really want to be a partner with you was very important for them because they wanted to come to some place where they thought things worked well and where there wasn't a lot of friction, but just basically good government.
Yes.
Fair enough. Now, when was the tipping point there where each one of you knew we got this? And what was offered to tip it over the edge? Kind of how did that day go?
I found out, and this is stressful. I mean, there was a lot of calls back and forth. Issues, I heard issues about sites, about needing extra soil, the cost. I mean, it just kept going back and forth, and they kept coming to me for more money. And I kept saying, I'm out of money. This is really, truly all I have. And it was kind of iffy, but the day that the mayor had gone out there with the governor, the CEO had told them, we are so impressed by you. We're so impressed that you're here. We want to work with you. Like, this is what we want. We want to make a home in Minnesota. We want to make a home in Shakopee. And this is awesome that you're here. And we have a call coming up later on, and we're going to make this announcement. I don't know if anyone else had any clue before that. That's when I found out. So I got the call from the mayor saying, get on this announcement later on, and they're gonna say based on getting all of our incentives, we're coming to Shakopee. So that's when I found out.
It's the same for us. We found out when they made an announcement saying, assuming everything that they kind of laid out happened. So it was long before anything was actually approved by the county board or the city council. And it was shortly after that. I think only a day or so after that trip out with the governor and the mayor.
Yes. In any field, the big, and I'll say this just as you look at economic development, one of the big problems with economic development and how site selectors view economic development sometimes is they are very leery about telling a community it's a done deal. They have a great fear that the community then sits back, and if we use Shutterfly, we'll just use this as an example. So, they come on and they say, hey, we're going to move to Shutterfly, we're going to move to Shakopee because we really want to be part of that community. Now the county and the city can say, well, we've rethought our incentive package, we're not going to offer that. We're going to offer something else, something less, because now the county's already made the commitment. So that's always a great fear by companies and by site selectors. And that speaks back to that the first time you meet with them, and kind of my other answer to yes, you want to develop a relationship with them that they trust you. You want to do everything you can to encourage them to trust you, because it's that trust that will allow you to be successful. If they don't trust you, getting to the yes is much more difficult than if they trust you, they like you, they've developed a relationship with you, and it's much easier to get to yes, much quicker to get to yes in many cases. For Shutterfly, the governor's visit was icing on the cake. Their decision, for all intents and purposes, had been made. But had the governor not gone and made that trip, had, somebody said something unofficially or officially by any one of the groups, that might have caused some heartache and some indigestion. And so you really need to develop those relationships, trust those confidences, because they will tell you things in private that they will not tell you publicly. That's okay. Keep those confidences. And then when they're ready, allow the company to drive that announcement. A lot of times, especially with the state government, we like to issue press releases and say, we'd like to welcome Shutterfly. If Shutterfly isn't ready to make that decision or make that announcement, then that decision or announcement shouldn't be made. So that's one of the things that you gotta play. You gotta play it by ear. It comes by getting to understand who you're working with and what their expectations are. Yeah.
I just got a question. If in the county and in Shakopee, there would have been a similar company that existed for 10 years already, would you have had to change the way you offered your incentives, or would you not have offered it due to the competitive nature of the existing businesses versus the new one coming in?
Well, from the county's perspective, I would tell you we would have made the same offer. I don't think that would have factored in, although in terms of our hybrid infrastructure, we have, in order to assist other businesses within our county, large employers, we've shared that with others that were there already. Now, maybe packaged a little bit differently than what it was with these folks, but the truth is, I don't think it would have made any difference at all in terms of the incentives that the county put forward, because most of the larger employers have received some type of assistance over the years as they've moved in to the county. So whether it was TIF or abatement in years past, so I don't think it would have changed anything.
Could you write that down and send it to Brown County Courthouse on State Street?
I'd be happy to do that.
Anybody in particular you'd like him to address it to?
And you know what, there's a term that's floating around often called economic gardening. They say 90% of business growth comes from the businesses you already have. And I definitely am a firm believer in gardening. I see a ton of businesses. We just had Imagine Print Solutions in Shakopee. They added on a 300,000 square foot expansion. They're hiring 200 employees. I found out in the newspaper. They never called us. I think maybe in the past they might have received some type of assistance, but I think once that's the goal, is once you have them there, once you have them established, you want to have that ongoing relationship, and you want to do those retention visits, and you want to find out, is there something I can help you with?
And if you look at you can look at economic gardening up on the web. It's actually an economic development tool that was fashioned in Littleton, Colorado, is where it got its start through the Low Foundation. But that's another piece that Scott County, none of our cities do it, but Scott County funds to the tune of about $300,000 a year economic gardening program for our existing businesses. And so we have right now 15 existing businesses in the county that are taking part in an economic gardening session. It is an incentive to them. It brings them certain resources to try and help them grow. Generally, the response that we get to that from the different businesses are, it's interesting to see government bringing me something I can actually use. But in terms of our hybrid infrastructure, we use that with existing businesses. We use economic gardening with existing businesses. And we have, for some of the smaller businesses, an open to business program. So there's a variety of tools out there that we use, and we actually look at it in terms of all of those businesses. And then we try and coordinate it. So while we fund economic gardening entirely out of the county's budget, we have involved all the cities in that process to make sure that businesses from the entire county have an opportunity to participate.
Any other questions before we wrap up here? Well, then I'll just close. I'm not done yet, Greg. I'll just close with one question. If you could give the city officials here one line of advice, just if you could sum up your experience in one line each, what would that be?
If you're willing to partner and work with others, you'll find that others are willing to partner and work with you. not engaged with your county, you should try and engage with them. And if they don't want to, then give me a call and I'll come up and tell them how they help you.
What's your number here?
You like my office, so.
I think my tip to you is to be prepared. When I got there, it was like a thunderstorm and it's been mass chaos, and I'm very thankful that the first stop shop was there because Shutterfly, we met with them, I think within like 5 days or whatever it was, they wanted our proposal. And thank goodness that this first stop shop had one that they had just done for Rosemont Emerson. We were able to change a couple of facts. That's part of their test. They are testing you to see what your response time is going to be. And so if you're not ready for them, that's where trouble comes into play. And I said any city can have a marketing brochure. Any city can have a one-page fact sheet. There's a ton of programs that the state offers that you can use at any time. And make sure your website actually has a phone number of a person you can call. Because I hear that from businesses all the time. You had to fill in my name and whatever to even get a phone number of someone I can call. Have a phone number, have them call you, have them start building that relationship.
That's the longest sentence I've ever heard.
I know.
You know, be more, Jim.
Make it simple. I think it's the easiest way to say it. When somebody comes to you, don't, here's our 500 pages, fill this out, get back to us, we have to copy it. Make it one page, get the basics, then have a conversation. I would say just keep it simple, the easiest way.
All right, let's thank them for coming